Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Story, where we discuss what Canada is, what Canada could be, and what Canada should be.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Canadian Story. Today, we are joined by Jordan Valeriote. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
It's our pleasure. Jordan is actually a mentor of mine. He's been making records that I've been listening to for, I'm sure over a decade now. He also founded Hardcore Music Studio, which is an online music production and education program. His courses have been an integral part of my own development as a record producer and a huge part of the reason why I'm actually able to do what I love to do full time now. So, Jordan, I just wanted to thank you for all that you've done for guys like me.
Oh, thanks, man. I didn't know that. That's amazing. Congrats.
Thank you very much. Jordan, let's start it off the way we always started off. Can you give us something you love about our country, Canada?
Yeah, I think something that I love is that we have a good reputation all over the world. It's one of those things where people say, oh, if you go overseas to another country, like just say you're Canadian or have the Canadian flag sewn on your backpack or something, and you always kind of get a warm reception, and I've found that to be true whenever I've traveled. So I appreciate that. I like that.
That's funny that you say that, because someone else that you will know, a mutual contact, Nathan Bulla, said the exact same thing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, exactly. It's true.
So Jordan, I want to start all the way back. I want to hear a little bit about your story and how you got into making records.
Yeah, so I grew up, playing guitar, playing different instruments, playing in bands throughout kind of middle school, high school, punk bands, hardcore bands. Absolutely loved it. I had it in my mind that I wanted to be like in a touring band. I wanted to be a professional musician in rock bands. And that was kind of my dream until my band went to record at a studio. A friend of ours was going to school for music production. For one of his projects, he brought our band in to record. And it was just one of those moments where as soon as I walked into the studio, it was like, wait a second, this is where I want to be. Like, this feels like home. And so from that point forward, it kind of like shifted my goal, and my dream was to be behind the glass, like producing and mixing and that kind of thing. And along with that, like right from that very first session, even though I knew absolutely nothing about recording, I was constantly frustrated with the results that my band was getting. Like, we'd go in to record and it never sounded the way it was in my head. It never sounded how we wanted it to sound, especially how I wanted it to sound. And I just always was like, I just want to be behind there, behind the board, like making those decisions. And so, yeah, I was planning to go to college for music production at Fanshawe College in London. And I went there for a year to do like the general program that would get me entry into the music production program. And after that year, just so happened that same guy who recorded my band the very first time, he was just getting out of the business. He didn't want to do the studio anymore. He was selling all of his gear, and I had the opportunity to basically buy all his gear and start renting the studio that he was renting. And so I just decided to do that. Convinced my...
You know what I love about this, just to bring this out for the listeners, is you were pursuing your passion and you found your passion. Mm-hmm. Right? And I think so often people get locked in, like, this is what I want, this is the only way that I can be happy. But what you were open to the world, and you entered into that room. I love that. You entered into that room, you're like, this is where I belong. And It wasn't like, oh, no, this is different than this concrete idea of myself that I want. It's like, oh, no, I'm open to what the world has to offer me.
Yeah, that kind of goes along with one of my favorite sayings that I always tell the people I'm mentoring and coaching is action creates clarity. It's like if you want to figure out where you should be, then you've got to take some steps first, to at least start heading in some direction. And then usually it becomes more clear as you go.
I love that. Action creates clarity.
Yeah, that's great.
So, so you buy all this guy's gear, you start renting the studio. So we'll call that maybe your official start into it. What were some of the challenges that you were met with right away?
Having absolutely zero knowledge or skill at all.
Man, what's it like to go into something that you know you're going to love and have absolutely no idea what you're doing. Was it scary? Was it exciting? What was the overall feeling?
It was mostly exciting. Like I didn't really have pressure on it at that point. Like it wasn't like I took over the studio and immediately needed it to be like a full-time business. It was more so like I knew I was just getting started, but kind of like I said, I always wanted to be the guy behind the board, and I thought if I was, then I would just instantly be able to get great sounds and great recordings, and that turned out to be not the case at all. Turned out to be a lot harder than I thought.
Isn't that always the case, right? We look at things, we're like, I could do it better. And I always say this about sports. I'm like, you got all these fans sitting there being like, how could he mess up like that? It's like,
I know.
I'd like to see you do better.
It's so true. That was exactly it. So, but at the same time, I was only recording my own band or friends of mine who were in bands. Like the local scene was so alive at that point that there was just, it was like I had like 20 friends and they were all in different bands. So there was never a shortage of people to come in and do demos or recordings or whatever. So I was just trying to teach myself. But I would say it was hard because I just didn't know anything. I was starting really from scratch, trying to teach myself, just trial and error. And it was maybe like probably about 2 years of that, of just kind of like, at first I didn't care that the recording sucked. Like I knew they sucked, but it was like, whatever, I'm having fun. But then a year or two goes by and it's like, man, wait a second. Like I'm progressing really slowly here. Like I gotta figure out something to do.
Things are not improving here.
Yeah, I still had the dream, right? And I knew I wasn't really moving forward as fast as I wanted to.
So what did you do about it?
So I decided, I thought about, okay, if I had gone to school, like what do most people do that go to school for this? I knew I wasn't going to go to school. Well, they come out of school, they graduate, and then most of them go and try to find an internship or an assistant job at a bigger studio. So I was like, okay, well, I already know the basics, so I'll just skip the school step and I'll just go and do what I would have done, which is look for an internship. So I did that. It didn't happen right away, but after a couple months of kind of talking to different studios, one of them kind of called me back and went in for an interview, and he somehow I don't know, believed in me. I don't know why. I remember like I prepared so much. I had like my resume, I had a demo CD of like the recordings that I had done, and I drove to Toronto and walked in the studio and walked into the guy's office, the owner of the studio, and I handed him my resume and the CD, and he just like literally took it and he's like, oh, okay, thanks. And he just tossed it aside. And
Classic.
Showed zero interest at all in it, and just asked me a few questions and said, okay, well, here's what we can do. And I thought I was prepared to work for free. Luckily, I got paid, kind of close to minimum wage.
Oh, that's nice.
Oh, that is nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got the opportunity to work at that studio. It was called Cherry Beach Sound in Toronto.
Awesome. I want to go into something you said a little bit. So you did 1 year at Fanshawe, and then you bought all this gear and you started renting the studio space. And at that point, you had decided that you weren't going to go back to school for audio. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a funny thing because now you have started kind of a school for audio. So that's a
good point, Zach.
I want you to, because I deal with this all the time too. I want you to talk about your school versus traditional audio school, and make the case for why you think something like Hardcore Music Studio is a better option for people who want to get into making records.
Okay. So kind of the main reason I didn't want to go to school at that point was that I had seen too many people go to these expensive programs for a couple of years and they come out and they go nowhere. Like I had seen too many people that had gone to those programs and not gone on to like do their dream, making records for a living. Like most of them just kind of flounder and then end up going into some other field. So there wasn't proof for me. And I think even to this day, when you look at these big colleges and stuff, it's like they never show you like what the records sound like of their students. You know what I mean? They never show you the before and after. Right. There's no proof there. Whereas, with Hardcore Music Studio, it's been over 5 years now, and we've got dozens and dozens of videos. We've got, a Spotify playlist of dozens of real world songs that are out there that our members are doing that sound great. You can hear before and afters of what someone's mix sound like before compared to after the training. There's just a lot of proof. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I just think it's more. The other problem with colleges is you're kind of getting like a classroom education where it's like a lot of theory of like, here's how to use a mixing console. Here's how to set up a microphone. Like that stuff is you need to know that, but it's pretty easy to teach, and you don't need to go to school for that. But making records there's a lot of art behind it and creativity. I think it's more art than science. And I think that sometimes when you go to these schools, they teach the science, but you don't get to see the art. I think to really learn, it's almost like being an apprentice in any other industry. Where
I want to dig into that more.
Yeah.
The difference between art and science, and how, because I'm in politics, nothing to do with music really, but but I did a 4-year program at university in political science, right? And I got out and went to work into politics, and I will say there was a lot of things my education gave me, and skill in my field of study was not one of them, right? Like it didn't prepare me for the actual application at all. So what do you can you pull out a little bit more? What do you think the distinction between art and science is, and what makes art, in a sense, more, if not more successful? I think it is more successful, but more fulfilling than the science side of it. Why do you need the art, especially in music?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I mean, with music, with any other type of art, like painting, whatever, you can know all the formulas, but just because you get all the formulas and the numbers right, that doesn't mean that you're creating something that's like pleasing to another human being. And it's something that is kind of mysterious, and it's just like you have to capture something that like your feelings and your experience and somehow represent that to someone else so that they feel the same things. And it's just, you can't do that with just kind of a cold scientific approach, and I'm sure in your field, it's a lot of like human interaction, which is, there's not, obviously there's, morality, and there's a framework to do that successfully, but still it's like, it's gray, it's in the moment. There's no formula.
It's the art, right?
Yeah.
It's the art, right?
Yeah.
It's the emotions. It's understanding what it's inherent, wouldn't you say? Understanding what, and I guess in your guys' field, what tones, what beats, what makes people feel a certain way, and how, what are we trying to bottle up here? Because really, the way I see it is music is bottled up emotion. It's a way of capturing an emotion. Mm-hmm. And you talked about that a lot in some of our other episodes, where it's like the really good artists are authentically conveying an emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you really need to, I mean, probably in any field, but especially in music or art, it's like the biggest and fastest way to grow is to just get around someone who's ahead of you and just watch what they're doing and just like absorb that. And so that's why being in that bigger studio was so helpful for me, because I got to see records getting made at the highest level. And it was just like, oh, that's how he's doing it. That's how he's interacting with the band. That's how he's building this, step by step. And that's what I try to do with my courses. I guess to circle back to that first question about the difference is like, the difference is that in my courses, I'm trying to like show people inside what I actually do. So rather than just a slide presentation of like, here's how to record, it's no, like come and watch me on video record a band from start to finish, and I'll show you every single step that I do on an actual project, And so trying to give people that internship experience while not having to go work for free or not having to work for minimum wage. They can do it from your home, right?
Yeah, I would say you've done a very, very effective job of that. I started with your hardcore mixing course, and getting behind the scenes into exactly how you put a mix together revolutionized how I go about doing my mixes.
Can you explain why?
Well, at the time of purchasing the course, I had been recording for probably, 8 years, a decade. And I had my own ideas and I had my own flows, and I knew what I was doing. But I knew, similar to what Jordan talked about, I knew that my stuff didn't sound like Jordan's stuff or other records.
You're like,
that
why
I love.
doesn't it sound like that? Yeah.
And so I think that there's a lot that you can you can do at the front end to teach yourself and learn things. And, you can watch YouTube videos, but there's a lot of weird advice on YouTube. And people get bogged down in unimportant things on YouTube.
Well, that's the case with everything, right? Is people often get bogged down in extraneous details. Like there's that Nate Silver book, right? You got to find the signal in the noise. And it sounds like Jordan was very good at laying out, no, these are the things that are important to pay attention to.
Well, yeah, and it just happened genuinely because like he said, all it was okay, here's a song. This is how I do the mix. Mm-hmm. And inherently, I just picked up so many nuances that I wasn't thinking about. And it still took me time to learn to apply them effectively, but it's been incredibly helpful. And then I went on to do the full stack producer course as well, which is I think, is that the biggest course that you offer?
Yeah, so I kind of had all these different courses like mixing, editing, tracking, and I was selling them separately. And it just, after a couple of years, I just had too many things, and I just said, you know what, let's just put this all together as one kind of all-in-one solution to learning this. And so that's really all I focus on selling is just that one big training program with everything in it.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, and I guess you can consider this a good thing. So I had bought hardcore mixing, and then about a year later, which is about a year ago now, I bought the full stack producer, and I was very interested on the section on editing, and so I went straight to that because I wanted to get better at that. And I haven't done the rest of the course because I think it's been effective enough. The phone just keeps ringing and I keep having to produce records.
Dude, that's the best. That's the best feedback I got. I remember there was another member who a couple of years ago, he had bought like all these other courses from me, and then I put out a new one, and he messaged me, he's like, man, like, sorry, I'm not going to join this one because I'm so busy in my studio. Like, I don't have time to. Like, yeah. And I was like, that's awesome. That's great.
That's good. That's good. Yeah.
I guess that's I guess that's the idea, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I just want to go back to your story because there's more I want to get to. Tell me a little bit about that internship and what that was like.
Yeah, so I worked there for about 6 months. To be honest, it was a lot of classic intern stuff. Kind of sitting around, cleaning the studio, taking out the trash, doing the odd jobs and stuff. Those big studios, I think to this day, but even at that point, they weren't as busy as they used to be. A lot of the stuff that came through was like commercial work, voiceover, some film stuff. There wasn't that many like good music projects that came in, but there were enough that it, like, let's say over the 6 months, there was maybe 8 weeks worth of like good music sessions and a couple like top-notch ones that like just those alone were enough to like totally expand what I felt was possible for me and what my knowledge was. So, a couple of them were, well, I think, I guess to zoom out, like I just got exposed to recording a lot of different things. So we did there would be full like orchestras in there. A couple times, big string sections. There would be a duet with like a piano player and like kind of opera style singer. We did a few of those. And so setting those two up in the same room and how to capture that. There would be a live rock band. There would be hip hop stuff. And I just got to watch like someone who had done this obviously for, over a decade and just see where they're putting the mic, what they're choosing. And a lot of what I learned honestly was like, it's not like the engineer there was really saying like, okay, here's why I'm doing this. Like he never did that. It was like, I was just watching and soaking it up. And sometimes I would ask like, hey, why'd you do that? Or I don't really understand what you're doing here. And he would explain it, but it was mostly just watching and being exposed to kind of a wide variety of situations. And I think when you get exposed to that kind of big, like sample size of material, I guess, and experiences, you start to pick out the common threads that allow you to kind of take your own approach and be able to adapt to new scenarios too, because you kind of see like, even though maybe I didn't record a horn section there, when horns came into my studio, it's like I was able to piece together like, okay, here's what I think that guy would have done in the studio based on everything else I saw. And then I would go in that direction,
Yeah, as someone who's pretty ignorant of all these things, even though I spend a lot of time talking or hearing about them with Zach, can you, to the listeners that we have who don't know anything about music, and there are a number of those, can you give us like a really brief summary of what does it take? Like, because I don't think people understand how much work is on the back end of this stuff. Like, what does it take to produce, let's say, a rock album?
Oh man. Well, it takes a lot. Like usually at a professional level, you'd be looking at, the writing stage. Obviously, it's mostly the artist, and then the artist would get together with the producer and kind of work through the songs and make sure everyone knows exactly what you're supposed to be playing and what the vision is of what they want it to sound like, so that by the time you go into the studio, all that's clear. So you're not rewriting the song in the studio, at least, although sometimes that happens. But you want to be clear ahead of time, set the vision, and then once you're in the studio, it's just like kind of piece by piece. It's like building layer after layer, like the drums and the bass and the guitars and the vocals, and you're choosing sounds at each level there. But you're also like, it's not just the science of like putting a microphone in front of something and plugging it in and recording it. It's also like, what do you do when the drummer isn't playing tight enough? And what do you do if the guitar player isn't, he's not nailing the parts? Well, you can't just still go ahead and put out a record that sounds amateur. Like, you're hired to hit a certain standard, right? So you got to solve those problems. How do you work with those people to kind of work around their issues, or kind of pull out better performances, kind of challenge them to do it differently, especially singers. So there's a lot that goes into it, and that's just the recording. And then like Zach mentioned earlier, then you're editing, then you're mixing, and then that also gets sent off to a mastering engineer too. So there's a lot of steps. You're looking at, let's say for one song, I would do about 2 days of recording for one song, and maybe a day to mix. So it doesn't necessarily take that long, but there's a lot.
Then there's all the pre-work, right? There's all the, like you said, the artist doing the writing. Now, you and Zach, I kind of see you guys as like engineers. I guess you are sound engineers to a degree, right? You're building, like you said, you're building layers. You're building I always say a cathedral or a tower, right? Like this is like a work of art. So you're not building a house. Like it's not like just preset. Okay, now we put up the frame and this is how the rooms are gonna go. No. You're building a work of art. So how do you see the artist in that, right? Because you guys are the guys constructing it, but you're also both artists in your own way. It's almost like there's a synergy between art and construction here, like between art and like you said, in action clarity. Mm-hmm. So how do you work with like a troublesome artist, let's say, who's like not, what you're talking about. You guys have worked with so many artists, like you're like, this is going to sound better. They're like, no. Like, I know what I'm talking about. Like, what is that like? And if you don't want to have to say it because it'll be bad for business, you don't have to.
No, yeah, I think that's like, it comes with time. Obviously when I first started out, I wasn't like, I wasn't sitting in the studio being like, you guys just listen to me, like do it my way. Like I didn't know enough. I didn't have the track record, the experience. But as you grow, I think it is the role of the producer to really like take the leadership role. There's been lots of times in the studio where it's just like, you got to push people to do something they're not comfortable with, or, you got to just tell them like, look, I think, this is not a good idea. And usually if there's an idea and I think it's not good, usually I'll try it anyway, because sometimes I'm surprised and I don't want to like, there's definitely been times where someone wants to do something in a recording and I'm in my head, I'm like, that's the dumbest idea. Like, it's not going to work. It's a waste of time. But I'm like, you know what, let's just try it. And then sometimes it actually turns out great. It surprises me. Or more often, that idea turns out, I was right. It sucked, but it sparked another idea.
Oh, yes.
You wouldn't have got to before. So, it's a little bit of a balance there. But to your question, I think it's just a growth process and just being comfortable taking more and more leadership to the point where, the artist comes in and you're kind of controlling and guiding the whole session, where it's like, okay, we're going to record this first. Here's the equipment we're going to use. And if the band comes in with a cymbal that's cracked or something, it's like, okay, you know what, guys, sorry, but here's the address to the music store. You need to go and get a new cymbal, like things like that. Not letting, you have to hold the standard up. I think that's the producer's job. A large part is like, you can't allow like mediocrity into the process. And so you're constantly kind of holding up that standard and just being like, it's not good enough. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's try something else. And I think that for the most part, even if artists are difficult at first, they come around to that and they actually really like that. And especially if you deliver a result that sounds awesome, that they love, they're going to come back again and again, because I think in all fields of life, that's what everyone is craving, is like that someone to show them the way, like
yes, absolutely.
And if they're hiring then
you used a word that I think is incredibly important, and I want to dig into it because I think you have some insights here. Leadership, right? And this is a word that is so overused that we need to actually define it for people now. But what you're talking about is leadership. Now, you're in a situation, right? And this is a situation we all often find ourselves in, where there's a butting of heads, right? It's like, let's say there's the artist wants it one way, you want it one way. And I loved what you said. You said, well, sometimes I just let them do it. And I was right, but it actually ends up being beneficial because I was giving them space as an individual to create, which is different than science. It's different than grading a paper and saying, oh, this is a B+, and then just, that's your work, this is your mark. It's like, no, we're working together to build excellence. And what is leadership? It's pulling excellence out of other people. Like I always say, you're not much of a leader if no one's following you, right? So, and how do you get followed? You have to say, well, this is where we're going. And so I loved what you said, where you're like, I just am calling them to a higher standard of excellence. How do you see that transform a person's maybe initial reaction to you of being like, oh, you're trying to control me? Because so many artists, in my experience, are like, oh, don't try to control me. To let me collaborate with you. Because that's leadership in a way that I think I'd like to hear your definition of, because it sounds like you have it down.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. It's like you got to have a direction that you're going in if you're leading, right? And you've got to, when other people are kind of losing commitment and energy to follow that, you've got to be able to kind of pull them along with you. Yeah, I think exactly what you said. It does morph and change. Even if they're stubborn and they feel like they know better. Sometimes it's just like, hey, just trust me. I've done this before. I know what sound you want. Like, let's just go a few steps together here in the direction I'm telling you, and then you can tell me what you think. And almost invariably, again, as long as you're hitting a high standard, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, that's it. That's the sound, in my context. And then they trust you, and then they start to relax into that. And another thing too is I've seen, a lot of complaints that people would say about, some of the methods that I teach, in terms of if the drummer can't play his part, like, or the guitar player can't play, or the singer's out of tune. Well, like if they come to me, the end result is like, it's going to be tight. It's going to be in tune. It's going to sound all of those things. So people say, well, that's wrong, because then the band can't actually play it live. And what I found actually is that with a lot of those bands that came in and they had all these problems, and I still pulled it up and made it into that kind of what I call the gold standard, is that it actually, you're serving that artist not only in giving them a great finished recorded project, you're actually serving them in that you're kind of illuminating weak areas, and the good artists will take that and then it'll make them grow. Like there's been so many times where a band will come in and I have to do all this crazy stuff to like fix all their problems and they can't play. And but then the next time they come in, they're way more prepared and they're way better. Like not always, but a lot of times that's what happens. And so you can almost see how it like can be a catalyst for their growth, because they realize, oh man, like I wasn't ready. I can't play this the way that I thought I could.
Right.
And so that spurs them on to actually get better.
And okay, so I want to know how you do that. Like, I love this. You give them a standard to aim towards. You're like, well, actually, this is what you could do. This is what you could be capable of if you would put your effort in that's necessary to get to that level. Oh, I love that. That's you have to get. Part of leadership is like so many people are like, oh, you're either good or you're not. Well, actually, we all suck at the beginning. Like you said, you had no idea what you were doing when you walked into that recording studio the first time, and we're like, okay. But because you then went and did this internship or this apprenticeship or whatever we want to call it, you were able to actually see what excellence looks like and just like kind of soak it in. And you're providing that to artists by showing them what they could be capable of, because their art form that well.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And usually in the studio, in terms of like how that actually looks, like in the studio, I wouldn't usually like explain to people what I'm doing or why I'm doing it necessarily. It would just be like, let's say a guitar player sitting beside me is playing his part. Okay, let's play it. Let's try it. And if we'll try it a few times. And if it's not working out, if you can't play it, I don't stop and explain like, okay, because you can't play this, we're going to do this and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, okay, just give me these couple notes. You know what I mean? I just dive right into it and just kind of like, don't allow the time for questioning. It's just like, you just say, here's the next step. Here's the next step. And then 20 minutes later, you've built something that sounds great. And then it starts to click for them and they get it, So just showing, I think with action sometimes is, maybe just cuts through what might normally be an hour debate
clarity.
with
Action
the band.
provides clarity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
To tie that back.
I love that.
There you go.
So I want to talk now about your transition from producing records all the time into your online business, which is Hardcore Music Studio. What was the catalyst for that decision? What was your mentality and why'd you do it?
Yeah, I guess it's hard. It's kind of hard for me to like trace it back and think like, why did I get into this stuff? But I guess in short, I've always had a bit of an entrepreneurial kind of spark, I guess, and kind of bent that way. Always wanting to try new ideas, to try and be kind of like different from the pack, and that's kind of what led me into music and recording in the first place. But yeah, I honestly, obviously music was my passion, recording music was my passion. Another thing I was passionate about and kind of still am is like just new technology. So I remember at maybe like 2011-ish, I think, I was super busy like in the height of making records all the time. But it was also like when the iPhones were like really coming to popularity, and I was seeing people making all these apps, and I was like, man, that's so cool. Like I want to learn how to make apps. And so long story short, I never learned to code or anything, but I learned again from buying a book and seeing what other people are doing. I learned how to outsource app development, and I partnered up with my brother-in-law. We ended up creating these silly Stickman games on iPhone and Android, and we had a couple hit games. And so all of a sudden I had this new income stream, and it just kind of opened my eyes to where I was like, okay, I'm really like, at that time I was really grinding away at the studio. I had been like a number of years, like 7 days a week, 10, 12 hours a day.
Right,
he's right there. He's right there
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
He's in the storm.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't regret any of it. I mean, I had so many great experiences, and obviously it helped me build to where I am now. But yeah, at that moment I was just like so in the grind. And then all of a sudden it was like, wait a second, like this other business is making money while I'm sleeping. Meanwhile, I'm like in the studio all day. So it just kind of opened my eyes to just that whole world of like building a business that earns 24/7. And so that kind of like started capturing my passion a little more. And it was like that passion was growing while I was also getting burnt out because I never took breaks in the studio, which was the mistake. And so, yeah, I kind of got to this point where this app thing was really taking off, and I said, you know what, like I'm just going to take a break from recording bands all the time, and I'm just going to focus on this app business. So, I'm trying not to make this story too long. So it turns out the app business kind of peaked and then started tanking. Like we don't have that business anymore.
Right. Because, Stickman games can only go so far, right? You play them for a while and you're having a great time, and then you're like, okay.
We kind of got in at a magic time, when we published, there was maybe a couple 100,000 apps in the App Store. By the time we published our last app, there was like over 1 million. Like the competition, it just got so hard. So anyway, we were kind of maintaining that business, and I had caught the bug for like business building. And so I was looking at all these other books, listening to these other podcasts, and I heard people talking about creating online courses. And I just seen the success that people are having and the impact they're having. And I just thought like, maybe I should do that. And actually my first course idea was to teach people how to build an app business, but I started doing that and it was like really hard. I didn't get any traction at all. So I was like, you know what, this is stupid. Like I only have like a couple of years experience in doing that. Why don't I try to make a course about the thing that I know inside and out?
That I'm really good at.
Yeah. That just made total sense, and I honestly just did it as a test. I had a book called Launch by a guy named Jeff Walker, and he kind of mapped out the whole process of like how to run a launch campaign for a new course. And so I just followed that step by step. And I just created a course like really quickly. That was my first one, hardcore mixing. And I launched it, and it did so much better than I thought. I was like, man, if I get 5 people to buy this, I'll consider it a success, and then I'll move on to something else. That was what I thought. But it turns out like 30 people bought it that first time around, and I was just blown away. And then even at that point, I wasn't necessarily thinking long term. I was just like, okay, that was cool. Well, I don't know. Like, I'm still building these apps. Like, I didn't have a long term plan. But then a month or two later, I started getting this feedback in of people saying how much it helped them. And I think there's 2 guys just from that first round that were like, they messaged me and like, man, my stuff improved so much that I'm quitting my job. I'm going full time in the studio because I'm getting so many calls to record. And I was like, what? Like, are you serious? And so that really motivated me to keep going in that direction and then keep building. And that's kind of, I've been on that path, 5 years later now.
I want to talk a little bit about what you just said, because I think it's really important. Like, you were excited to hear that the people that you were providing this information for were doing well, which is the opposite of the scarcity mindset, right? It's the opposite of saying, well, if they're doing well, how can I do well? It's like, well, the more other people do well, the happier you are. I can already tell that about you. You loved hearing Zach's story that his studio is full. It's not like you're in this crazy competitive. Well, you guys are in a competitive world, one of the most competitive but you guys have reached a point where you see other people in your industry succeeding, and that makes you happy.
Yep.
What gives you that mindset versus the zero sum? If other people are doing well, that means that I'm not doing as well mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I could say I definitely didn't always think that way. When I was kind of, again, in the grind in the studio, I would see other producers who were maybe succeeding faster than I was or landing bigger projects, and there was a bit of jealousy there. But yeah, it's just realizing that doesn't serve anyone, and especially in this case where I'm trying to teach people, like, that literally is the goal that I want them to get to. So if they're getting it, I mean, one of my favorite examples, which you would think could be a negative thing for me, is that one of the bigger bands I worked with here, they're a Canadian band called Silverstein, and I did a few records with them. And the producer, who's from Toronto, who has done, their last, he did the next 2 or 3 records after me, was actually a student of that first hardcore mixing course. So it's like,
yes.
he literally he didn't take my client, not at all, but in a sense, you could look at it and be like, wait a second, man, you told all your secrets to this guy, and now he's working with the big clients.
Right.
But
right.
Again, that's a huge, I look at that and I'm like, man, that's awesome. I love seeing his success. And then that's great. That's better for both of us because he's succeeding in what he wants to do. And then that's also an amazing testament to
what you're doing
too.
Yeah.
So we're both winning in that scenario.
So, and you're right. A Beautiful Place to Drown sounds incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Sounds
he's
so
doing
good.
fantastic work.
Yeah.
No, I just want to go more into this, because isn't the mindset of a lot of people. So what do you think changed your mindset from scarcity to abundance?
Man, that's a great question. How can I boil that down?
Do you think it was the app where it's suddenly like, oh, there's money coming in that I just did not expect to show up, and you're like, oh, there's more ways to make money. I'm not locked into this one way of making money.
Yeah, I think that's definitely part of it. It was kind of like doing a lot of reading and soaking up podcasts for a number of years, kind of in the entrepreneurial world, where you really have to understand, to build a business, that you only make money by providing value and serving others.
Yes, it is, right there. Yes.
Right, and if you're not helping people, then your business is going to fail, if it's just all about you. So I think that just having that drilled into my mind, definitely from a bunch of kind of not real life mentors, I guess, some, but mostly virtual mentors through podcasts and books or whatever, repeatedly. And, that's reinforced just by my worldview too. The things I believe. I'm a Christian. It's like, it's more blessed to give than to receive, and you start to experience that in real life, and you just want to lean more and more into that, I think. So those are a few ways, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, both Zach. I would call myself a Christian. I'm not sure.
Of course, yeah, I do as well.
But it's interesting for me that you just said the give and receive thing, because that's so counterintuitive to the way that we're taught, like say economics, right? It's like we're taught there's finite resources, and economics is the science of distributing those finite resources. And yet, as I say to Zach, and I think this is something that artists understand inherently, and people who work with artists and people who love art, is there's one infinite resource on earth, and that's human ingenuity. And I think that's what entrepreneurship is. So I would like just to hear, like, so you're a serial entrepreneur. You're not just you've started multiple businesses now that have been successful. We have listeners that are entrepreneurial, some who've been massively successful, some who are just starting. What advice would you give someone who's starting out as in any business, not just necessarily yours? Like, what does it take?
Well, I think what it takes, number one, is you have to be providing something that people actually want. So a lot of people start a business based on what they think is cool. And sometimes you get lucky and other people think it's cool and they want it too. But really the starting point is making sure that, there's actually a market for what you're selling. So just talking to people, hey, is this a problem for you? What are your problems? How can I solve that? That was like the building my own course and figuring out how to launch that the first time. Like that was a lot of the process of what I went through is honestly sending out surveys to people, getting on the phone with people like, hey, what are your struggles with recording? What things do you need help with? If someone were to create a training, like what would the perfect training look like? And taking all that feedback and then creating exactly what they need. Like that is how to have a way higher chance of success in starting something, is to literally just talk to people and then build the thing that solves their problems, versus just coming up with random ideas and kind of hoping it works. So that's one thing. And the second thing is just like focus on the things that actually matter. I'm still learning this to this day. I think it's a constant discipline for entrepreneurs. But look, if you want to paint houses and make money, like you don't need to start an Instagram account. You don't need to build a fancy website. Like no, like the goal is to paint houses and make money. So like go start knocking on doors, go put flyers in mailboxes, and go start talking to people and making offers. Like start making money. And then worry about all the other stuff. Like a lot of people, like it's like, oh, I need to update my branding, and I need to like put $5,000 into my website, and I need to post an Instagram story every day. It's like, no. Figure out the one thing that actually brings in revenue and just do that.
Do that one
over
thing.
And over and over.
Yes.
I found that too with my studio. I built a website over a couple days, and I always feel like I need to go back and update it, but I don't really. I mean, I need to update my resume, but you know what? People are still filling out my contact form. And, I really feel like I should be posting on Instagram all the time and like having like great stories. But you know what? What's actually more important is making really, really great sounding recordings. And that's what people call me for. So I think that's a really, really great point.
Yeah.
We live in an Instagram world. We live in a facade based world, right? Where you project. I mean, there's a great poem by T.S. Eliot where he says, there will be time to prepare a face for the faces that we meet. And I feel like, I mean, he wrote that before any of social media or anything, but now we're in this situation where we're all preparing these faces. And I love what you guys are saying, which is, the face is okay, but like when we get down to brass tacks, if you can't do what the people want you to do, why would they keep paying you?
Yeah. And if
then the only people who are going to pay you are advertisers, right? Because you have some following and they want to like tap into that, but you're not going to get people paying you for doing what you love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and maybe what you love is like just being a charismatic, entertaining person, and you build an audience, and there is value there to advertisers, like you're saying. But yeah, I think to your point, Zach, it's like you're bang on, and guys, I run an online business. I sell online courses. I don't post on Instagram. I don't.
Right.
Oh, that's a very interesting point.
Yeah.
I haven't updated my website in 2 years.
Yeah. Once you provide a high enough quality product, people will seek you out.
Yeah. I mean, I still have to. The one thing I do is create YouTube videos, but still, it's like I'm not in that rat race of like endless content posting. You know, I've gone in my business, I've gone 6 months without posting a YouTube video, and like my business still goes along. You know, because again, I know the things that actually bring in customers and sales, and I can just do those things and ignore a lot of the noise. And I think a lot of people too they think that they want to be an entrepreneur and they think that they want to run a business. What they really want is just to be popular and to be famous. And those two are not.
They're not the same at all.
Some of the most successful entrepreneurs I know, nobody knows who they are because they're just building their business. They're not out there talking about it.
I actually had to that point, I had a great experience. I was out in Leamington visiting someone who owns and operates a whole bunch of greenhouses out there. And he gave me a tour for, I don't know, must have been 2 hours of his greenhouses. And the man just loved talking about every single detail, whether it's the bugs they're raising to go after other bugs so they don't have to use pesticides, or it's like the lighting. And he just went on and on. I was like, it's people like this. It's people like this who are the successful entrepreneurs because they actually just love what they're doing, right? Yep. They just love it, and I see that in what the way you talk about your business, the way Zach talks about his business. It's like this isn't. People think that business owners are doing it to make money. Yes, but that is a nice outcome. But like to be a truly successful entrepreneur, you have to love the business itself.
Yeah, I think you have to love the process of building and growing too, and everything that comes with that, and yeah, hopefully loving the results that it's producing in the world.
I wanted to ask you a question. The lowest hanging fruit in your business is not posting on Instagram. Without giving away too many of your secrets, in the position that you're in now as an entrepreneur, running the businesses that you do, what is your low hanging fruit and where is your focus?
Yeah, great question. I think at this point I have a proven training product that I know works. I have an audience. I guess the lowest hanging fruit is the people who already, in any business, is people who already know, like, and trust you, right? So that would be my YouTube subscribers or my email list. So literally, like in this kind of business, if you have an email list of people who are interested in what you have, it's literally one marketer tells this story of how he wanted to put a pool in his house, and someone said, "Well, how are you going to pay for the pool?" He said, "I'm not going to pay for the pool. My list is going to pay for the pool." And so he put together an offer and he emailed the list and got the money for the pool. So, but again, it's like, it's kind of a funny story. I think it's true. But again, it's just creating something that this group of people wants, and they already know and like and trust you, and then offering it to them. So that's the lowest hanging fruit. And that's really what drives this business, is just putting offers in front of the people who want it. Yeah.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
So looking forward, what's next for you? Do you have new courses on the way?
I'm like I said, I kind of combined everything I'm doing into one main course offer. So going forward, just continuing to improve that, continuing to make it better and better. I want to have like the best product in this market with the best results. So just it's kind of doing a tandem of improving that while also like focusing on just getting into the hands and getting in front of more people. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on that side. I'm also just about to launch a new software business, audio plugins. That's launching in a few weeks. So that's kind of like with my courses, I'm kind of continuing to go higher and higher end. So I'm raising my prices more and more and providing a higher and higher service. So it's becoming a little more niche. Whereas it already is niche. Whereas the audio software, the plugins, it's like, that's kind of what I'm thinking as more of like my mass market business that's going to be able to have, whereas in the training side, it's like I'm maybe getting hundreds of customers a year. Whereas in the plugins, like we're looking at thousands and thousands of customers a year, just because the market's so much bigger. So I'm excited about that. And that's something that I've got a great team on board with it. Everyone's doing awesome work, and I'm really just in the role that I want to be in with that, which is like just kind of visionary ideas. Like this is my plugin idea. This is what I want the business to look like, and then I have the people in place who are actually executing that, which allows me to continue building the training stuff, which I love. So those are the two things I'm focused on right now.
What plugins are you building?
Well, I got two coming out, like a saturation plugin and kind of a bass mixing plugin. coming out, my first 2. But I've got a list of basically all the tools that I would want, or in the studio that I've thought of through the years. I'm able to build them. So yeah, there's a long list of ideas, but it's just going to be really simple but highly effective tools. That's kind of, I think, Zach, you might kind of notice, like in my training, I'm always trying to take really complex things and just make them as simple as possible. And so I'm trying to do the same thing with my plugins, where maybe in the studio, there's something that I do when I'm mixing a bass guitar, and normally I've got like 3 or 4 plugins and tools in a row that I'm using to accomplish the result. I'm building plugins that can do that in one plugin with like 2 knobs.
Cool.
So
Cool.
That's kind of my mission on that side.
Yeah, one of the best things I got from your courses is, we talked about the science and then the art. You are a master of making the science get out of the way so that the art can happen.
Oh, there's a line. There's a line. I love that.
Thanks.
Wow.
And if there's one thing that I've gleaned from going through your material, it is being effective enough at the science so that it's out of the way so that the art can happen.
Man, I'm so happy when I hear that, because it's like I could tell that you get it, you understand it. And I feel like I can't even take full credit for that, because that is like the thing that one of my biggest takeaways of that internship is when this producer named John Fields is in there. He's on Switchfoot, Jimmy Eat Worlds.
Switchfoot. I love Switchfoot.
Yeah, he did their biggest record, and he was.
Oh wow.
He was there with the Jonas
Beautiful.
Brothers.
Was that Beautiful Letdown?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So he was there with the Jonas Brothers for a week recording, of all people, and I got to sit in on that session, and that was like literally the thing, was that I had been making it all about the science, all about the gear, but I saw him work, and he's set everything up so quickly. It's like he knew where he wanted the mic to be, he knew what he wanted to use, and it was just like, it was all about the music, and it was like the gear just like disappeared. It was like, okay, we need to add this lead guitar layer. Okay, put this mic on the cab. Okay, there you go. Pick up the guitar. Let's go. It was never, he never stopped to like fiddle with the equipment. It was like, just let's do the technical stuff as quickly as possible, set it and forget it, and like get on with the music. That was like the number one thing I took away, which still influences me to this day. And I'm glad to hear it, comes through in the training as well.
We try to keep it under an hour for our listeners, but I have one more question just on a personal note. What do you think of Native Tongue, Switchfoot's new album?
Oh, you know what? I haven't heard of it.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have to have a follow-up call, because I wanna hear your thoughts on it. I love that. Well, Zach knows how much I love it.
Well, Jordan, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate you doing that. Where can people find your courses? Where can people find your plugins? Plug yourself.
Yeah, sure. My like you said, my website is hardcoremusicstudio.com. So you can just search that online, search it on YouTube to find all my content. Like I said, I'm not on really Instagram or social media, but you can find my plugins too at blacksaltaudio.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to The Canadian Story. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The CAD Story. That's The CAD Story. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with your friends and family. Let's work together to remind Canadians how great their country is.